Good morning. Hope you're off to a great Tuesday so far. We have three quick stories with what's going on and why it matters. Just a warning if you hear coughing or PJ Masks in the background, either or. It's my 2-year-old. I thought we were done navigating this period of illnesses and viruses in my household. Turns out not necessarily the case. I'd like to think I'm more flexible after the last 2 years, but it's still difficult. So keeping an eye on him, keeping him close to me today. One of the great things about journalism is it always gives you a little bit of perspective. And I was looking at some historic dates and I thought, wow, what I'm confronting as a mom is really difficult, but at least I'm not flying by myself between the Hawaiian Islands and the US mainland for the very first time, 18 hours plus in a plane by myself, like Amelia Earhart did. She started her journey today in 1935, and she was the very first person, man or woman, to be successful in this mission. And several people died attempting. So it was a really big deal when she accomplished this in 1935. 1935 sounds like a long time ago, doesn't it? It's 87 years ago. It's not that long ago. And the technology that's changed in that time period is extreme. You know, over the holidays, there was a lot of news coming at you, but NASA just announced that they had launched a new telescope that they believe will allow us to gaze into distant galaxies. So think about what's occurred in less than 100 years, a lot. And we're going to talk about some new technology today. Speaking of technology, one of the things I've never done, and I don't know if you've ever done it before, this pandemic, is any sort of at-home testing for a virus. And that's something that a lot of us are very familiar with at this point. We're going to talk more about COVID-19 with Dr. Rutland, a great primary source. He is a doctor treating COVID-19 patients up close. He's also a father. So we love talking to Dr. Rutland. And I really think that's the best way to cover the pandemic right now, is to get your questions directly answered by a great source. Just in case you don't get to hear that Q&A that we're going to do later on today, I wanted to flag this for you. There's a question about the technology of testing during this time period of the pandemic, and specifically the Omicron variant. A lot of us have done at-home testing with nose swabs, right? Different degrees of how deep you've gone, perhaps in the last 2 years. Now there's a emerging question about whether or not we really should be doing throat swabs along with nasal swabs. I'm sure you've experienced this. Someone is symptomatic, maybe in your household, close family and friends, maybe other people's are symptomatic, but then they're not testing positive. What's the deal with that? Some are wondering if we're actually testing in the most effective way. So that's something I'll ask Dr. Rutland about. But in case you're experiencing that, or you're able to talk to your own physician, it might be something to ask about. Check out this picture from China. You can see that they're actually doing throat swabs there. It's difficult to get information, reliable information out of China, but one of the things we do know that's happening now are some widespread lockdowns due to an outbreak of what we believe to be the Omicron variant there. So something to watch, and testing is something we'll continue to watch as well. Second story you should know about today is the United States just greenlit hundreds of millions of dollars of aid to Afghanistan. This is really important for a couple of reasons. Number one, some believe that Afghanistan right now is the site of the world's worst humanitarian crisis. You have tens of millions of people facing famine, and there's been a big question about aid going to that country from the United States and others. And the reason is that if you give aid to a country, often it is connected somehow to the government. And the United States and others have been very hesitant about officially recognizing the government of the Taliban. And this has put the United States in a spot of wondering, well, do we provide humanitarian aid, which we think can be important for several different reasons, or do we not? Because we don't want any sort of connection to the Taliban. And this has been a very difficult spot to navigate. This aid is going to go through humanitarian groups, but the question is whether or not these aid groups can actually get to the people that need it. What is their connection to the Taliban government? There is a national security calculation to this as well. In areas where there's not a lot of social services, you can look at countries like Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan. Terrorist organizations tend to take root. And part of the way that they can take root is by providing social services, medical care, food to the people that need it. When those terrorist groups become more efficient than a functioning government, it's one of the ways that they gain strength. So right now, we know the Taliban is in control, and prior to the Taliban, nearly 80% of all of Afghanistan's budget was from outside aid. So how countries are going to navigate this very difficult time period is a big question. The decision right now from the U.S. government is to push money to Afghanistan, and we'll watch to see what happens. About just under $800 million of U.S. aid has gone to Afghanistan since October of this year. So I want you to know about that as well. Last story, speaking of medical advancements, really big one happened this week, and that over the last several days. And that is a genetically modified pig heart going into a man that was experiencing heart failure, who wasn't a great candidate for organ transplant and had very little options. He became the first person to receive this pig heart. He survived surgery. He has survived several days. And doctors are calling this perhaps a watershed moment for others that need organ transplants. Could change the way that we're going to be doing this in the future and help a lot of people. We'll see. The question of what happens from this point on, how healthy he is, what happens over the next several weeks and months is going to be really important. But he said, he didn't have any options and he wanted to help people. And so 57 years old, and he made history in America. So more on that story and all of these on our website today on smarternews.com. Questions and comments, let us know, and bring your questions for Dr. Rutland, because we'll take a little deeper dive into the COVID-19 pandemic and where we are and what to know a little later on today. Hope you have a great day, and I'll see you soon on smarternews.com.